So this morning, we'll transition into the joint meeting where we will need, correct me if I'm wrong, legal, for each board to go through roll call again to acknowledge who was here for the joint meeting. Correct?
That's fine. I mean, I think if you adjourn your meeting, and then you can come back in session, and EDA can come into session. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Just let EDA come in?
Based upon legal, we'll come back into session. Same people are here.
All right.
To do the same roll call.
For everybody.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So I'll start with PPIC. Mr. Barham?
Here.
Ms. Cherry?
Here.
Mr. Peterman?
Here.
Mr. Reineberg?
Here.
Mr. Toops?
Here.
Mr. Wallace?
Here.
Mr. Weaver? And from the EDA, Mr. Hines?
Here.
Mr. Kovacic?
Here.
Mr. Mitchell?
Here.
Ms. Saunders-Smith?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Present.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Yes, here.
So we have a quorum for both. So this morning, we'd like to routinely get the boards together, the two boards that we staff as an economic development staff, so that you all can have an opportunity to, one, meet. We'd certainly like for you all to go around the room, quickly introduce yourselves, a little bit about yourselves, again, so that, because we have some new members on EDA as well as on PPIC since we've last met. But just quickly go around, say who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into some further discussion. Start with Mr. Toops.
I'm Jim Toops. I have been a member of PPIC for about the last 5 years. Served as vice chairman and now as chairman. In my other life, I'm owner of Serpro of Portsmouth and Serpro of Norfolk. And it's nice to meet all y'all.
I'm Ron Peterman. I've been a PPIC member for 2 years. I'm a retired naval officer, and subsequent to that, I became a consultant for, a lot of the defense businesses, and I currently am supporting Rockwell Collins. And I live in Churchlands.
Grant Reineberg, I live in Waterview. I've been on the PPIC for about 3 years, and my day job, I work for the federal government.
And I'm Ned Barham, lifelong resident of Portsmouth. Been on the PPIC since how long? 12 years?
Past chairman.
Work for T. Parker Host. I'm a terminal manager, and we load the ships for Purdue Farms and the grain elevator.
Good morning. I'm Camille Cherry. I work for Crofton Industries. I live here in Old Town, and I'm new to the PPIC this year. This is my second meeting.
I'm Guy Wallace. I've been with PPIC for probably right around 10 years now, 8 years, 8 to 10 years. Involved in the transportation business, so we are involved in both rail and truck and do a lot of work with the ports here now, doing in and out work with them, based in Memphis, Tennessee.
Good morning, I'm Don Scott. I live here in Portsmouth. I'm a local attorney and married with a daughter. Yeah, that's it.
That's all.
That's it.
Ray Smith. I'm several months on commission here. Former school board member, city councilman, and also my real job is Dominion Energy, and I look forward to retirement after 41 years in November.
41, wow.
Yeah, so, and I'm a resident of Cavalier Manor.
I'm Kyle Kovacic. I've been on the board since January. I work in banking and the real world, and I'm over in the Port Norfolk neighborhood.
Malcolm Mitchell. I've been on the board about 7 months. I'm a retired retail executive, and I live in Portsmouth.
Good morning, Teresa Saunders-Smith, somewhat retired, I guess, from juvenile detention. I think I'm on the board particularly because I used to be the former owner of a couple businesses.
Anthony Hines, I guess I'm the senior member here of the EDA at a whole 6 years. And outside of the EDA, I work in local government and live in the Mayflower Park area of Portsmouth.
And I'm Barbara Smith. This is my first meeting, so I'm new to the board. I am a lifelong resident of Portsmouth, born here, and I've been a realtor in the area for 26 years now, so still working.
Okay. Well, thank you all again, we like to, twice a year, but at least once a year, have the boards come together, kind of talk about what you all have going on, and at the same time, look at opportunities for you all to collaborate. I think as we go through, we have a slide that talks about some of the projects you all have going on. But when you see the way they cross and the lines kind of blur a little bit, there's some ways that you all can collaborate to have an even larger impact than you're already having on what we do as a staff in economic development. So what I like to do is have the chairs maybe speak a little bit to some of the projects that we have. We'll go ahead and start with, if we could, Mr. Toops, or Chairman Toops, preferred freezer project, Burns Point Road, and then maybe Mr. Peterman can speak to the Southgate Annex.
Preferred freezer, most of you are aware of. It was in the news. We were fortunate enough to have the governor come down to introduce it. Excited about that because it's the old BASF site, and it's not all of it, but it's a significant portion of it. And preferred freezer is coming in and creating jobs, and the total investment
$60 million, 60 new jobs,
and that is over the next year. Anxiously awaiting construction to start, but they have a pretty accelerated timeline. And we gave a match to the governor's fund in order to help secure that project. Burns Point Road, if you drive over the Jordan Bridge and you look straight down, that is our property. We have sold a piece of it, and that is the concrete crushing, and at some point it's supposed to be grain loading, and there's a grant from us based upon how they actually invest the funds and do what they're supposed to do. We also have other acreage, and part of that is it was a Superfund site, and as it's becoming available, we actually have potentially someone who is moving into part of it, and there's still some acreage left. So again, very much part of what our goal is to help move Portsmouth forward. And then the last one came up a little bit. Mr. Peterman, if you want to talk about Southgate.
Yeah, Southgate, if you know the shipyard, it's huge, and they have down across the river from where all the BAE piers are that are full of ships. There's 5 piers down there, and then it goes into the Jordan Bridge and some. This property is underutilized. In fact, 2 of the piers are condemned, and 2 of them are needing a lot of repair, and 1 of them is still in use. But this is underutilized vice surplus property, and so we went to the shipyard and asked, what's to be done with this, instead of it just growing weeds and it's become a junkyard for stuff. It's from any place around. If it didn't go over to St. Julian's Creek, it seems to go to the shipyard. Well, there's about 18 acres over there that's waterfront, prime waterfront property, plus a big laydown area. And what the Navy is proposing is that we, the city, or Portsmouth, sign a 50-year plus lease, similar to the way it is over at the ball fields at St. Julian's Creek that Chesapeake has done. And then on this 50-year lease, you could make investments and whatever, but they're certainly at risk because the government could obviously cancel the lease and take the property back, which makes it a little less desirable, but there's going to be a lot of caveats in there that will allow to lessen that risk. And what they're looking for is an exchange of services, not money. Because if we buy it or do it for cash, that cash goes into the Treasury of the United States, and then the President gets to spend it anywhere, or the Congress gets to spend it any way they want. So what they're looking for is services. And their number one thing that they like is parking. Parking is their number one problem. So they're looking at potentially we provide, pave the lots and maybe run a transit service or something like that in exchange for them letting us use this land for the next 50 years. Or them or us, tear down the piers that people keep getting fined for because they're falling into the river, and then boats hit these pieces of wood, and then the Navy has to pay for the damages. So this is a work in progress. It's a 3-year POA&M that will hopefully be blessed this Thursday by Admiral Rock and his team, which is the Navy Region Mid-Atlantic, and they're working together with the shipyard, the CEO of the shipyard, to make all this come to fruition. There will be congressional interest in this. There will be politics will play, and I think we stand in good stead for getting all the 19 acres because they want something to happen for the city of Portsmouth, and they're looking for services in kind for that growth or whatever we do with that property.
And it's kind of consistent with, to me, as we look at what our mission is, it's to proactively be looking for opportunities within the city. Ports, obviously, and this is waterfront land that are underutilized, and that potentially we can be an arrow in the quiver of what the city has to help move forward, with the end goal of redevelopment and jobs. So Ron's done great work with this. They're interested now. We wanted to be front in line, but with the city and with our group, we're at least front of the line, we think. You never know for sure, but we think. And the services thing is they have needs and they don't want money. They just want us to help with some needs. So there's potentially a win-win.
Yeah, because
great work.
Some of the stuff is police and fire department support, maybe child care, whatever you can think of that we might provide them as in-kind services that they need. And they said the top of their list is parking. So, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Mitchell, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Okay. One thing that was left off by PPIC that we did not put on the board, but was just previously spoken about. PPIC is also involved in a new grant program through the state called the Port Host Communities Grant. It is a grant that was worked on very diligently by Mr. Donahue, along with then Delegate James, Ms. Sherry Neal in our legislative office, to put forth a program that is $1 million that's set aside, it's in the governor's budget, specifically for the 5 localities in the state that have the port in their backyard. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Donahue, that would be Portsmouth, Norfolk, Newport News, Richmond, and Front Royal.
Front Royal, sorry.
So there's an application, there's an application deadline, there's a minimum award for each locality of $150,000. But if one of the localities does not utilize that funding, then there's an ability to go up to half of the amount of a project if necessary. We have our first application that will go forward. The PPIC just voted to move forward with the first application. We're excited about it. But I bring that up because I think that's a good transition into what you all do from a standpoint of some of the grants and assistance that you all give. And so I'll turn it over to you, Chairman Scott, to kind of talk about some of the projects you all have going on.
Okay, real quick, I'm gonna start from the bottom up because I think the last one is the one that's probably has the most level of interest right now. The 1500 block of High Street, that is the project for a healthcare center. It would be proposed to be, I think, 2,500 square feet.
20,000 square feet.
I'm sorry, 20,000 square feet. 20,000 square feet of new construction there at the 1500 block of High Street. The 700 to 710 Crawford Street, that is a proposed apartment complex that is supposed to be coming online. And 409 McLean Street, that is where Ryan Homes is now. I believe that project is crossed several hurdles now. We're coming down the home stretch now. Yes. There were a lot of some issues earlier with that project with Ryan Homes and their engineering and other issues with the city back and forth trying to make sure they got on the same page. My understanding now is that everybody's on the same page, and we're moving forward, and that'll be done. And lastly, the Victory Entertainment District, which is a proposed, my understanding is, and I'm sure there's a lot of other understandings in here and presentations on, but I believe that it's a proposed $550 million investment into the city with a potential entertainment district with anchored hopefully by possibly by a gaming center along with theaters, restaurants, and the whole 9 yards. So that is what we are working on. That is the property that the EDA has and it's under site control now, and hopefully when the time comes we'll be able to expand that, make that project happen.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I don't quite understand. Do you have a checkbook that you guys write checks on, or how does the EDA work?
Say again? No, we don't write checks. So I guess the same way that the PPIC is formed is by statute and the Virginia Code that we're entity, the authority is given by the state through and working with the city council. We're appointed just like you guys are from the city council. We have a budget, but we don't write checks. We partner with these entities. What we do have is we are able to get site control of some properties that are, as you stated earlier, they're underutilized and they've been taken out of the revenue stream for the city. And the EDA can come in and either get it through condemnation process with our attorneys, or we can purchase it at as you would purchase on a huge discount, which we've done recently, and take those properties back. In some instances, we had to get that site back under control because that site had been vacant from my understanding, well over 20 years. And we got that site back. That's a vital piece of property right off 264 in Victory, in that area there. It is a crucial location because it's right off the interstate, literally. And it's an opportunity. I tell people often about Portsmouth in general. We have it's a blue-collar working class town, but we're sitting on white-collar real estate. And we're underutilizing it. And I think we're on a road now where if we do this right, we have the opportunity to maximize our white-collar real estate for the benefit of our blue-collar workers here in the city.
You also, I think I understand it correctly, have the ability to borrow funds in a tax-advantaged way for someone who has a project that makes sense. And so that's something, I don't mean to speak for you, but I just know that that's what...
And a lot of the things that we do, we have to get backup from City Council.
Yeah.
So a lot of the projects that we are taking underway, these projects are with the direction and understanding that City Council is going to back us up, but we'll take some risk on the behalf of the city that the city can't do. That's what the EDA can do. We can go in and do some contracting that City Council can't do alone. That's the purpose of EDA. It's similar to the Housing Authority.
Thank you. And to answer your question also, Mr. Peterman, very similar to the PPIC, neither one of the boards receives an appropriation from City Council. Your money is generated, or the funds are generated from the buying and selling of property. The EDA is the same way. So our job as staff is to make sure we are doing just that, buying and selling property. So we are at a point to where, certainly we might act like you have a checkbook, but you don't. And we have to keep that in mind. So we are very strategic on what we bring to each board and each body, and what we discuss with each body. But as you can see, those lines can cross. And there are certainly opportunities for you all to work together to really, again, maximize that impact. And that kind of segues into where we want to go next is opportunities for collaboration. Maybe some ideas there. One thing I'll throw out selfishly as Economic Development Director is that it was talked about before with past chairs and vice chairs, but certainly the opportunity to assist staff in their day-to-day when we have certain opportunities for sponsorships. Certainly we also have a lease that we pay annually. That shared cost is always beneficial to staff. So I think now is a kind of an opportunity for you all to kind of throw some ideas out there. Staff will kind of take those, put them together, and see where we can carry the ball from there. But staff has enjoyed working with both boards. Love some opportunities to work with you all collectively.
So I'll throw something out there, Robert. I guess first of all, I think I see our boards as enablers to you and your staff. since you guys are the experts and, understanding the inner workings of the city and kind of making that, mesh with industry. But for everybody else and just thinking about the city, I can think of 4 entities, about 5 really, that own property here in the city. School board, the housing, board, EDA, PPIC, and the city itself. So 5 separate entities, all own property or can own property here in the city. And if you look across any of the GIS systems, like show me vacant property in Portsmouth that's owned by one of them. There's a lot of property out there that's just raw land or old just everything in between. Yes. So to your point about collaboration moving forward, is there a comprehensive body group looking at all of that going, hey, we've got some housing property in EDA and PPIC and there's a lot of vacant school property, maybe some of that property needs to get turned over to either EDA or PPIC or both, and so we can, move that along and, get something built there. And I'm not expecting an answer, but just for discussion purposes, that's how I see the city.
Gotcha. So not to answer, but to answer.
Okay.
If you go to our website, our new website, accessportsmouthva.com, we have taken what is the SAIL app, which is the free app for your phone, that has all of the city-owned property, and that's the city entities. Mm-hmm. Lists all of the properties there. So you can, it's a comprehensive list, GIS, mapping, everything. What staff then does is, yes, we do sit down and say, okay, EDA has this, this, and this. The city has this, this, and this. That's when we go to the city manager, city council, and say, this really should be in the hands of this body or this group. There are some opportunities that I won't go into right this second, but there are opportunities that you all have properties that either you own and maybe that can be owned around you, and vice versa. But right now, our staff is the one that really makes that recommendation.
Spearhead that coordination effort among all the various entities.
Also would speak up, Chairman Scott, EDA commissioners, under Mr. Moore, I'm excited about what we're doing. We had brought up a couple years ago, and it's something that makes sense for a long-term partnership. Portsmouth has opportunities that are long-term, and one of those is the Craney Island the addition to the port, which is going to be very significant. And what I encourage us to look at is a long-term plan to where, as that develops and there's more shipping coming in, why does all that development have to go to Suffolk or Chesapeake? Why can't we be looking with like a 10, 15-year plan to say we want to have shovel-ready space so that people can look at Portsmouth areas, not just other places? And that's a long-term kind of viewpoint, but these are the right people to kind of have that viewpoint, working with Mr. Moore and the city, so that when things like that happen, people say, well, how did they do that? Well, they did it by planning. And, you know, there are opportunities for us if we just look, because people are always down on Portsmouth and they're missing the boat. Mm-hmm. There's lots of opportunity here if we will just look at what we have and start utilizing it. And we can sneak up on people because they're not looking for us to do it. And I think we're starting to show that. There's lots more opportunity.
If I could say just one thing in addition, you know, there's a thing going on right now called the Joint Land Use Study that kind of goes into what Jim's talking about with Craney Island, you know, and all the government-owned properties that are, you know, Navy and DOD owned. And I think, you know, I guess how do we become aware of the status of that until the final report? Are you, Mr. Moore, are you the guy that's doing that, or?
So I've been, I think myself and Mr. Baldwin have been the kind of primary contacts from a standpoint of us being interviewed for that process and that study. And I have asked that they keep us abreast of that, because certainly we want to know any piece of property that is potentially developable. We want to know about it. So,
if you'd like, I'd be glad to sort of expand on the process here. So, of course, those of you who don't know, Joint Land Use Study is really a joint process. The City of Portsmouth, City of Chesapeake, the Navy, projects being managed by the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. This will be looking at really, as it says, joint land use, looking at land use around all of our Navy facilities. That's including Craney Island, the hospital, and the shipyard, and from Chesapeake's perspective, St. Julian's Creek Annex. This also has a sea level rise component and mandate in it. And for those of you who follow the joint land use study they just did in Norfolk and Virginia Beach at Dam Neck, whatever, that was the first one really that has been done with a sea level rise component. Ours will be the first one really that has the sea level rise land use piece integrated into it. The process is underway. They've got a policy committee that's established. The city's represented by the mayor, the city manager, myself. There's also a pretty robust technical committee of staff members, and then we bring people in and out depending on what the issue may be as we go forward. There's a consultant that's been hired as the primary on this from HRPD, that's AECom. Very prominent consulting firm. They've done a number of joint land use studies, and so the process is underway. They haven't announced any dates yet, but the next kind of public phase of the joint land use study is going to come up in November. They're going to have public meetings. Sort of the first public input sessions will come up somewhere in mid-November. We'll certainly let Mr. Moore know the schedule of those as it comes out. We will host 2 of those in the city. We'll do one during the day and one in the evening, and 2 different locations, and that's still being worked on. The process is about a 12 to 18 month total process to get to the end. It's been a long time getting here. We had our kickoff meeting over 3 years ago, so it's been a while getting the process moving along here, but now making progress here, and so that's kind of where that is. And Brian Sweats from the Plan Department, he was our Comprehensive Plan Project Manager. He's serving as the city's technical project manager on the joint land use study as well, and we'd be glad at any time to provide briefings and updates anytime Mr. Moore asks us to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just wanted to touch on a couple of things I think Commissioner Reinberg mentioned. This has been kind of an ongoing conversation for a number of years, but I just want to take just a second and commend Robert and Mr. Baldwin about some of the work that actually has taken place in that arena, which they did a full evaluation with the PRHA group and did a huge transfer of property and put that over with the EDA. It was actually a mutually beneficial arrangement. PRHA got tired of paying to cut the grass. We didn't mind paying to cut the grass, so we're taking it and actually marketing it. My understanding is that it's moving kind of in the right direction there. But I did want to just talk about the potential partnership. I think that would make just way too much sense for this group to think about. Is you guys are naturally looking at this from ports and shipyards and those types of things, and we've got such a tremendous resource just steps from this office, which is that river out there. We have a tremendous need in workforce development as economic development, and I think in the school system needs naturally a shot in the arm in terms of its trades program. I think we all could figure out a way to all come together and help our largest employer, which is the shipyard, our school system, and economic development to bring additional industry into our area if we could get our arms around producing a quality workforce here in the city of Portsmouth. And I think that's probably our biggest problem. If you can have a workforce that is trained and ready to go, this man's job gets 10 times easier, and everybody else's around this table gets a lot easier to bring new industry in. So I'd like to propose, maybe having, a small committee of commissioners to actually maybe 2 from this one and 2 from this one to come with staff and see about working together to figure out a way to how does this work. Get with the school system because they have a whole Department of Education thing that they've got to go through. But maybe they've got space. They got buildings that are, like you said, buildings that are not being used. Maybe we can do something that's some sort of workforce development in one of those spots, and maybe we can throw in a few dollars, and you can throw in a few dollars, and the school system can throw a few dollars in. City maybe a few dollars, and get this thing off the ground because it really does need to get off the ground.
Suggestion here, I don't know how we would do this, but the Virginia Maritime Association already has an educational committee. as we've got all these folks from the industry and that they have conversations, they're doing this now, working on it. The problem with getting in it, you have to be a member of the VMA. I'm a member of the VMA, but it's something that everybody's realizing and recognizing, and maybe rather than trying to duplicate that, is maybe see if we can get Portsmouth representation into that committee as well. And that way we don't create something that's already out there working now.
Agreed. I'm not saying that we need to reinvent the wheel, because we certainly probably don't have the resource to truly do it the right way. But if we can, gather partnerships, put it out there, hey, we're interested in this, and we need to be serious about workforce development. That is, again, like Commissioner Scott mentioned, Chairman Scott mentioned, is we got all these great places to build and all these great places to redevelop, but our human resource is lacking.
Right.
And we need to really get our arms around this issue, because companies are going to come if we have a good workforce. And if we give opportunity to the people that are coming out of the high schools, they're less likely to leave us and continue to cause this population drain, especially of the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that maybe college isn't cut out for them. But we've got lots of opportunity here, and we're failing as a city to do this. So I think that's our biggest opportunity, and I think we got enough smart people around this table and in staff, at the school system, all these places, all partnerships with the shipyard, other marine, opportunities. We just really need to find and get this thing rolling. So maybe that's something maybe staff can look into on behalf of both of us. See if there's something we can, if we have to put a resource into it, of whether a person or, a small committee of the two bodies, report out, something of that nature. But I think it's something we really need to do. But again, I wanted to congratulate you guys on the PRHA thing.
Thank you. So,
starting to work towards that.
In the interest of everyone's time and to wrap up, unless everybody has something, from a staff standpoint, I will tell you that we do have a workforce development program called Hire Portsmouth. As we continue to roll that out, the plan was to present that to you all at your annual budgets, so that yes, you would have the opportunity to help fund that. So keep that in mind. We do welcome the attendance of some board members there. We ask that you allow us to finish finalizing the program first, so that we have something for you to really digest as we roll it out. But we are working in partnership with several entities, including potentially Hampton University with regards to this. So that is an ongoing discussion. And I can tell you, staff here says it, I say it all the time, they hear me say it all the time. We do not want to create a job in Portsmouth that cannot be filled with a Portsmouth resident. But to take that further, we do not want a job created in Hampton Roads that cannot be filled by a Portsmouth resident. Unemployment is not high at all. It is very low, even for the city of Portsmouth. It is low. And it's not that people do not have jobs. It's that we need to have better training for them to get better jobs. They are underemployed. And that is a standpoint that the nation is struggling with. So we are looking forward to working with you all to bring those things to fruition. So
We're certainly not unique in this. I'm not saying we are,
No.
but we could be ahead of the curve of this
Yes.
situation.
yes,
Proper planning and collaboration.
yes.
And I think what should happen and what we ought to do is, I think it's a very good suggestion. I can agree, because it also would address crime, and we know
Absolutely.
that's a big problem that we have in the city. But maybe we take it back to our group and discuss it, and you discuss it, and then we'll get back with Robert to decide if we want to move forward with it. But I think it needs to be discussed. I think what he's getting at is something beneficial that I feel like we need to do everything we can to try to change culture, to change things that are happening in the city that are negative, and it's things like that, that can help tremendously. So if we can, my suggestion is just that we take it back to our various groups and just hash it out, but we can spend a little more time on it, and then if it's something that we all want to do, then we come back.
Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to say I'm really excited about the possibility of a long-term plan. I think that's essential for us to get to where we want to go. And one of the things that intrigues me is a kind of an assessment of all the land that we have and what's the best use for it. And once we determine that, do we have the right infrastructure? So when we're able to go out and sell it, do we have the cable? Do we have the roadways? Do we have all the access that makes it a sellable piece of property? And I think kind of what's short-term, long-term, and future. And I think if we're planning for that, I think that's essential for us to really do the big things that we're talking about and making sure that we have the workforce to support it.
Commissioner Mitchell, I did like 3 years ago now a low-level white paper, kind of doing that and just outlining some of what I saw. I will tell you that Mr. Moore and his group with Brian and that, they're executing on a lot of the places that I saw that were underdeveloped. And so, but be happy to share just as a starting point. And again, I look at this as exactly what we're trying to do, is a partnership of we're all arrows in the quiver of how we move economic development forward. But with some resources, it allows them the opportunity to plan for long term so that we do have stuff ready. And some of the properties that we've all seen just sitting there get turned into, and I know they're doing that, and so I'm very supportive of them. But yeah, how do we work together to do it? And I'll share that. But it's a 1-2 page read, so it's not like it's going to take you very long.
And I just want to add to that. I mean, Mr. Peterman was talking about that we have a checkbook. We have a checkbook. It's unrealized utilization of getting revenue in. That's how we create the revenue and the tax base that we want to create here. We have the resources. I think we look at this thing, we have assets, and how do we get folks to want to be here and invest in us? And that's what our job is, to create marketable, attractive sites and partner with folks who are invested in our long-term future. So we have to have all of the pieces. We can't just have the property or the infrastructure. We have to have the workforce too. So if we do all of that, then yeah, the checks will come in, and it's called tax revenue for our tax base and for our city and our leadership to use and to deploy and hopefully get a return on those investments.
To put a finer edge on this, for us, if you look at West Norfolk and look at the old factories and whatnot there, with Preferred Freezer, that's a big win. There's quite a bit on the cusp that hopefully will come to fruition in the very near term. So as you think about, I don't know what EDA owns over there, what you're looking at in that area of the city, but for our board, that area is an area that we're heavily focused in, and like I said, we're right on the edge. I mean, where there's an infrastructure piece that looks like going to pay to help upgrade. There's a lot we're doing in that area of the city specifically. So that, from a joint perspective, there might be something in that area of the city. I know you guys, Victory is going to tie you up, for quite a bit. But if there's another area for joint, it would be that area of the city.
Well, and also, I just couldn't help but to notice the conversation about the checkbook came up when we talked about the Victory Entertainment. Just keep in mind that was a result of a failed development, that lots of things had already gone into the ground there. And it was, when we said shovel ready, that's probably the most shovel ready piece of property we have in the city. And that's the reason why this opportunity, whether we support it or not, is there, is because of all the investment that had gone in over the past 15, 20 years from the previous developer. So without looking at it in context, a lot of people will look at that and say, well, this isn't ready, this isn't ready, this isn't ready. But when you look at what had gone beforehand, all that infrastructure was ready. And a lot of things could go in that spot right now because of all the infrastructure that had gone into it prior. So I just wanted to make sure, as a person who's probably got the most seniority to remember all of what happened there on the EDA side, that site is shovel ready.
So the last thing we like to do, or I'd like to get consensus on, historically, the EDA has had a retreat, if you will, to discuss these economic development matters. from the perspective of working together and collaboration, I would really like to request a joint retreat between the two boards. It is normally in the February-March timeframe. You'd have to clear a day on your calendar, but we sit down and really, at that time, staff is allowed or has the ability to sit down and lay out the plans for the next fiscal year. It allows us to really get some input from you all as boards, but I think that's also a great time to be around the table, a larger table, to have a larger discussion.
One other item, just to make sure. I think that's a great idea. I want to make sure we give the port the opportunity to talk to both groups.
Certainly.
He's here.
Certainly. Certainly. But I would just put that out there, and we'll keep reminding you about it, but just something to think about, a full day of hashing out these real challenges and concerns that you all may have as boards and that we have as staff in preparing that plan for the next year and thereafter. So.
After the General Assembly session concludes?
Yes.
So you know what's happening?
Correct. We may have some things going on after the General Assembly, casino, things like that. At the end of the day, these boards are very important to what we do as a staff. These monthly meetings are never in vain. We rarely cancel unless there's a small thing called a holiday, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. But we meet monthly, and we appreciate you all taking that time out of your busy schedules and for all that you all do to give us this time. We have nothing else for this joint meeting. We do have the EDA.
Except that you have the...
We do have, if you also suggest, we do have, I'm sorry, Mr. Gullickson, an update from the port, so you all can hear that as well as an EDA.
I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Robert. Good morning. I think collaboration is obviously a theme that we're really big into at the Port of Virginia, and we wouldn't have been able to achieve the success we've seen here in Portsmouth at Virginia National Gateway without the collaboration from both the City of Portsmouth and the respective, our delegates, obviously in Richmond, were very favorable in helping us make that happen as well. So it is collaboration, so it's great to see these groups coming together. We're fortunate to continue that collaboration, definitely on the boots on the ground with economic development. Our team at the port has been continuing to work very closely with Robert and his staff. Obviously, we can point to Preferred Freezer and that investment here in the city. It definitely reflects the investment we've made at VIG to add additional refrigerated handling capacity. I think there's more opportunities out there. We're definitely happy to have Preferred, and there are other players, and so we definitely want to make sure that all the industry, especially in that refrigerated warehouse space, is aware of the opportunities here in the city of Portsmouth with its obviously ideal location and proximity. And we're excited to see what comes of Wild Duck Lane and the potential there. Obviously the grant, the Port Post Locality Grant, was something that was part of our legislative initiative this past session, so we're very thankful to have the level of collaboration. In fact, all the communities, host localities, the Port Authority, the VEDP, and Delegate James came together in crafting what was an agreed upon language around that program that was so that each locality could obviously receive benefit and find ways to fully utilize those funds if a locality weren't going to proceed. So a tip of the hat to the port localities that really came forward with, I think, a creative level of idea and messaging towards that program. And then finally, I'll wrap here. August for us at the port, we're getting into our peak season. Though it was flat this August, I can tell you year over year, we're on track at 5% year over year growth as a port. So really excited, again, hopefully have another record year. I think that'd be our 6th record year in a row. So it's exciting times. We continue to see the big ships coming. It's always exciting to be over here in the Port Norfolk, West Norfolk area and coming across the bridge there, and you'll see, it wouldn't be too rare to see 2 ultra-large container ships there at the berth at one time. I know it was about 2 weeks ago. That's pretty exciting stuff. That's exactly what we went to the market and we're selling, that we had the ability and capacity to do that, and now we're proving it. So I think it's very much a great time to be here in the city of Portsmouth, and we'll continue to carry that message forward into 2020. So thank you, Mr. Moore, and thank you to the EDA and the PPIC for this opportunity.
Welcome.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly. Madam Chair.
I just wanted to remind you all, and I'm going to stand here with Ray because you talk about old times on this board. Mr. Baldwin and Ray Smith and I go back at least to 2004 with these groups. And it occurs to me as I look around the table that in my tenure here, we have never had such a strong economic development staff, the whole team. And each of you were literally hand-picked for what you bring to this table. You know, whether it's Camille with Crofton or Ned with terminals or the naval officer or real estate banking, you're here for a reason. And there's some really bright minds around this table, and so we really want and expect and demand that you enable these guys to do, and gal, to do these great projects and get this land onto the tax rolls. So I think the idea of a joint meeting together in February or March, whenever, is great. And you know, when you sit around a room and look at the maps that they'll provide you of, you know, what's available, what's around, and maybe take a retrospective look of the last even 18 months of what has gone on the market and sold. You know, for PPIC members, do you realize that every single piece of property the EDA has owned in the last year is either sold or under contract? That's like unheard of. That's never happened. So, good job to everybody and keep up the good work.
Okay.
Other than that,
To adjourn then.
well, for the PPIC, to adjourn.
Okay, let's take a quick 5-minute break. It's coffee, donuts, soda, water.